I'm Mike Dempsey. I've been a graphic designer for over 50 years. During that time, I started off as a very lowly paid messenger in a commercial art studio. Prior to that, I had a series of terrible jobs. I didn't go to university. I didn't go to art school. I'm completely self-trained. And I've only got evening classes that I attended on dark November evenings in the winter of the 60s, when I begged them to let me do something creative because all I could do was draw. And they put me on the only course that was available because I was so late in trying to get into the evening classes. They put me on calligraphy, which I absolutely fell in love with. It was kind of the basis of typography, right? You know, actually, I changed my style of handwriting immediately. I wanted to be able to write in an italic fashion, which I kept to this day. But, you know, later when we talk about the questions in particular, there's a reason that I mentioned this particular thing. But going back to, you know, condensed life story. So lowly paid job in various commercial art studios, literally making coffee, running messages, doing all that. I then graduated to designing book covers in a very lowly way. I used to go to bookshops and pick a cover that I thought was badly designed, go home and on my kitchen table would redesign it and made a little portfolio of work. You know, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just was driven to do these things. And I had a little A4 folder, and not far from one of the studios that I worked at, or one of the commercial art studios I worked at, there was an artist agent that used to have illustrations in the window. They had a window, like a shop window, it's weird, in Farringdon Road. And in the window, they had they used to put the most fantastic illustrations in, and they were all from major publishers, work of, you know, of illustrators of the period who were absolutely, you know, terrific. And so I walked in there one day, you know, nervously, and asked them what this place was. And I was confronted by this incredibly tall, elegant looking guy in a pinstriped suit who had the most, you know, precise BBC English accent you could possibly imagine. Anyway, he invited me in and he explained to me what they did. And he said, why do you want to know? And I said, oh, because I'm, you know, I work at this little studio and I'm really interested in, you know, illustration, book cover. He said, well, have you done anything? I said, well, I've got some things in a little book, you know. He said, bring them in tomorrow and I'll have a look and give you some advice. And I thought, wow, great. I went in the very next day with my little book. The first cover was for Psycho. And then turned on and he said, oh, well, these are rather good. How would you feel about coming to work here? And I thought, what? Anyway, long story short, I joined this little artist agent who were very prestigious to be their in-house person that would put the type on book covers, because they actually produced illustrations for publishers for book covers. Then the publishers themselves, who often did not, most of them didn't have in-house studios, they'd have to find someone to put the type on. So he, thinking cleverly, well, we'll have someone here to do it and charge them. And that's, so I became their in-house designer. And for me, that was the beginning of my journey. Just to bring you right up to date, I'm now sort of semi-retired. I had a company called, originally Carroll and Dempsey. It became Carroll, Dempsey and Thurkel, and that became CDT for short. I ran that for nearly 30 years. I left it in 2007. It went on for another 4 years, I think, and then it sort of disappeared into the ether. And I now mostly, you know, do the occasional job, but I'm always doing something. So I do a lot of work for Royal Designers for Industry, which I'm part of. And so I keep myself, you know, I cannot not be a designer. I think you sign up to be a designer for life. You don't retire, you get deleted in the end, is what happens. So there you are, that's me. Well, this takes me back to the evening classes, really, because when I was studying calligraphy and illuminated lettering, as it was also called, part of it, they had at this, it was called the South East Essex Technical College, right? evening classes on my bike. I'd go there, love the class, but in the break, we always had a break, you know, for a Kit Kat or something, or a cup of tea. And I'd go to the library. They had a library, very good. I've always loved libraries ever since I was a small kid. I spent more time in the local library than anything else, simply because where I lived, and I came from a really, really rough working class background, you might not think so, and I used the library because it was so warm. You know, they had radiators. I mean, we had nothing like that. Anyway, I got used to having books around me, and I got used to looking through them. I was dyslexic, and still am, and so I didn't read them. I looked at the pictures, so I visually storing, and I then started to look at book covers. So that was where my sort of interest in understanding maybe what design was. But in the evening class library, I was going through books. I used to go through things like Graphics, Modern Publicity. They were all annuals, you know. And then I saw this square book, which was a sort of cloth-bound case. And it said, and this is the original title, it changed. It said, "The Graphic Artist and His Design Problems, Joseph Muller-Brockman." And I opened it, and as I was going through, I suddenly thought, this is a whole new world to me. It's about space, it's about type, and it's about image, and the combination of those three elements displayed in such a way that I'd never seen before, you know, using the classic Swiss grid system, which, you know, at that time, which was 1963, no, earlier actually, I think it's about 61. Whenever that book was published, this is a brand new book, I just thought, I've got to know more about this guy. So I just read that book in the reference library, I think 3 times. The first time I didn't understand a word of it. I couldn't work out what it was all about. But in the end, I understood that there was this invisible grid that you would work to, and at the end, you would produce a piece of work that had wonderful sense of balance, even though it was, you know, asymmetrical. It all worked because it had a grid, but the grid disappeared, you know, so you'd have a picture here and a bit of type here, but they related with a sort of tension. So I thought, so he became my hero, Joseph Muller-Brockman. I'm asked this question a lot. It's a question I asked on, I do this series of podcasts called RDI Insights. And I've recorded, the latest one I've recorded is with Tom Gould, the illustrator, who's fantastic. And that will, you know, that will be going up soon. But I've done 50, he's the 50th. And I asked that question at the end, do you have any advice for a budding illustrator or a budding product designer or a budding architect? Because it's a cross-disciplinary thing. And I get all sorts of interesting answers. So I should have some interesting answers. Well, I can only tell you what I believe in over the years that I feel are important. And I think first and foremost is, well, don't just hang out with graphic designers. You really need to embrace all the creative disciplines. So I'm thinking theatre, film, music, literature, fine art, illustration, photography, and in particular, theatre and acting, because in our business, the world of design, you have to explain often to people who don't understand, particularly what you've come up with. I mean, I've worked with Japanese clients, and if you work with a Japanese client, they want you to justify exactly why you've used that color, exactly what you've done. That's part of and they will sit there and just wait for you to do that. So advocacy for your work is really important. And a lot of designers will leave university and you may have a good portfolio, but lacking in the ability to present. And that is really crucial, more and more, because these days there are more and more freelance people because companies are shrinking and you find that you've got to go and see the client yourself. So I would urge any designer working at university to seek out the drama department, if there is one, and go and join it, or join a local drama, because that will make you have to address yourself to other people and make them believe you. And I, as a young person at school, I loved drama, never went into it. But when I was much later, when I was 59, I joined. I believe in fate. And I was in the Farringham Road Library. See, my studio was around the corner in Bramham. I'd always walk around to the library and sit in the library and look at books and things. And I happened to be looking at this. I picked up a copy of The Stage. They had newspapers and the stages of newspapers. And I looked through and it said London Method School of Acting. Now I know about the Method School because that's the school that Marlon Brando went to, a whole load of people. Okay, and I'd always been interested in that. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. So I looked at where it was, right across the road. So I went across and went to their offices and I said, could you tell me about this? And they said, yeah, but we'd have evening classes for, and I said, so what sort of age? They said, well, any age really, but we have to say they're mostly in their, sort of 20s. I said, can I join? And they said, well, you can go and have a free evening to sit in. And I went and I stayed for 2 years, and loved it. I loved it. I ended up writing scenes, acting scenes, creating light. I just got completely immersed with all these young 20-somethings, and I loved it. I really loved it. So I would recommend that a lot, because they'll find a lot out about what makes them tick, what makes you do what you do, and it is just such a great stimulating thing. And it's about people, and you will be dealing with difficult people in design. People that say, can you make the type big? Why do we do it? And that is, for me, a red rag to a bull. You spend ages working it out, and then someone says, can you make the type bigger or the logo bigger? Anyway, so that advice. And also, I think these days, students and designers need a moral compass. They really do, because we're living in an age of incredible waste, as we all know, and designers are powerful. May not think so, but they are, because they are in part of a group that are persuading people to buy things, to do things, and that is powerful. So one example, we live in an age where there's an increase in obesity, which leads to all sorts of illnesses that are really going to affect the health system really badly. And there's now a thing called childhood obesity. You see little kids, they're fed on Coca-Cola, 16 spoonfuls of sugar. So it's difficult, I know, but designers that are involved in packaging should really, really think twice about what they're doing, because they are promoting playful designs for children. And the point of those three combinations, sugar, salt, and fat, are a combination that will addict people. That just taking salt and sugar together, they formulate it in such a way that, you go into any garage and there's an array of, it gets bigger and bigger. I don't know if you've ever looked lately at the things that you maybe remember as a kid, like Mars bar and Yorkie bar. They're all about 4 times as big. And you see people buying them and giving to their kids. And I think that's the work of a designer, you see. It's part of the advertising industry, design industry, they're all part of the conspiracy to, cause, this terrible epidemic where people are going to have their feet, hands or feet chopped off because they end up with type 1 diabetes or whatever it is, and they're going to be very ill. So I say, moral compass, think about what you're doing. And it's difficult for a young designer who just wants a job, let's face it. These days it's difficult. And so to say something like that may seem ridiculous, but I think ultimately you do have to think about the power of what you do. And I would say, if you think about the medical profession, part of their ethics is do no harm. And I believe that designers should do no harm.